Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going deep on American English conversations.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at this U.S. State Department resource. It's designed for folks learning English.
And it's full of these real-world examples.
It's really interesting, yeah, for formal and informal settings.
Exactly. So much we can unpack here.
I think the thing that jumps out at me right away is how Americans signal that formality.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I see it right away in these first couple dialogues about greetings.
Right.
One is like a student meeting a professor and a prospective student.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is like two friends bumping into each other on the street.
Yeah, and they're so different.
And it's interesting how Americans seem to have these specific greetings for different times of day.
Oh, absolutely.
Like in that first example with the professors, good morning.
Right.
But then later in the day, you'd switch to good afternoon.
Yeah.
And that's something that maybe you wouldn't hear in other cultures.
Yeah, it's like an unwritten rule.
And in that same dialogue, the professor says, don't mention it.
Oh, yeah. Instead of, you're welcome.
So what's up with that?
Well, don't mention it is definitely more casual.
Okay.
It's like the professor saying the thanks is no big deal.
Gotcha.
Which I think reflects how Americans in general are kind of uncomfortable with formality.
Interesting.
Especially in everyday conversations.
Totally. And it's not just the words we see the handshake, too, in that formal dialogue.
Oh, absolutely. That's such a classic American thing, like
Yeah.
a ritual almost,
Mm-hmm.
a quick physical connection
Yeah.
to build rapport.
It's funny how much can go into a simple gesture.
It really is.
Now when we switch to the dialogue with the friends, it's like all warmth and excitement.
Oh, yeah.
Jane greets Helen with this extended hi.
Right.
It's so casual and energetic.
That long I sound is key.
Yeah.
It really emphasizes that enthusiasm, like I'm so happy to see you.
As I'm actually saying it.
Exactly.
And then there's that classic, how's it going?
Oh, yeah.
Is that just another way of saying, how are you?
It basically is, yeah, but way more informal. You wouldn't use it in a super formal setting.
Gotcha.
But what's interesting is even though it's phrased like a question, it doesn't always need a super detailed answer.
That's true. Sometimes it's just like, good, how are you? Back and forth.
Exactly.
And then before they part ways, Jane says, see you later.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they don't actually have plans.
Right.
It seems kind of vague.
Well, that vagueness is the point.
Okay.
It avoids that awkwardness of having to make concrete plans.
Interesting.
It's basically just a nice way of saying, hope to see you again sometime.
I can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah.
So we've talked about greetings, but these dialogues also show the contrast between formal and informal introduction.
Oh, for sure.
In the formal one, they use titles and full names.
Right. Mr. Wilson, Dr. Smith.
Like right away, set in that respectful tone.
Exactly.
And then the response, nice to meet you, seems pretty standard across the board.
Yeah, it works in pretty much any situation.
But when we go to the informal introduction between Jim and Mary, it's totally different.
Yeah, they skip right to first names.
Right.
It's like the mutual friend is saying, hey, you two should know each other.
Yeah.
No need to be all formal.
It's amazing how much those small choices change the whole vibe.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about something that can be confusing for language learners.
Okay.
How Americans express time.
Yeah, time can be tricky.
In the what time is it?
Yeah.
Dialogue, Tony says, 7:15,
Uh-huh.
which means 7.15.
Right.
And Americans seem to use quarter after and half past a lot
Yeah.
instead of just saying the numerical time.
It's partly tradition, I think, but it also fits with that American casualness we were talking about. It just sounds more relaxed.
But context is still important.
Oh, definitely.
Like when Natasha says they need to be at the restaurant by 7:3,
Right.
we only know it's evening because she mentions the surprise party.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So much is implied.
Okay, now let's get into telephone conversations, which can be awkward for anyone.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
John's opening line is, hi, Alice, it's John.
Super straightforward.
Yeah, but it works.
It gets right to the point.
But what's interesting is how he asks Alice out to a movie.
Yeah, how does he phrase that?
I was wondering if you'd like to go to a movie tonight.
Oh, so polite.
Why so indirect?
Well, in American culture, being too direct can be seen as aggressive.
Interesting.
And that I was wondering if softens the request
Okay,
and gives Alice a way to say no easily if she wants to.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And Alice just responds with, sure.
Nice and casual.
Yeah, perfect for the situation.
Exactly.
Okay, we've covered greetings, introductions, even phone calls.
What's next?
But what happens when communication breaks down?
Oh, that's a good one.
That's where things can get tricky.
Yeah, for sure.
But there are ways to handle it.
Like what?
Well, can you say that again?
Yeah.
Dialogue shows us some common strategies. For example, when Luke can't understand Sarah on the phone, he uses phrases like, "Can you repeat that?" or "The phone is cutting out."
Right.
They're simple, but they work.
They signal that something's wrong, but without being rude.
Right.
It's important to be direct, but polite.
Yeah.
Of course, in a more formal setting, you might hear someone say, "Excuse me,"
Yeah.
or even, "I beg your pardon."
So there are different levels of formality, even when you're just trying to understand.
That's right.
It all depends on the situation.
Exactly.
Wow, this is just the beginning.
I know, right?
We've got a ton more to explore.
So much good stuff.
We're going to take a quick break,
All right.
and we'll be right back to unravel even more mysteries of American English conversation.
I can't wait.
Okay, so we've talked about greetings and introductions.
Right, and even some phone stuff.
Yeah, now let's look at some everyday situations.
Yeah, where these cultural nuances really come out.
Like in the ordering a meal dialogue, the waiter uses phrases like, "Can I start you off with something to drink?"
Right.
And "Are you ready to order or do you need a few minutes?"
It's all about making the customer feel comfortable.
Yeah, like rushing someone through their meal would be super rude.
Oh, totally.
And Ralph is very polite when he orders.
Yeah, lots of pleases.
And he's specific about what he wants.
Which is important.
Yeah, you wouldn't just like snap your fingers and say, "Bring me food."
Definitely not.
Okay, let's switch gears to the doctor's office.
Okay.
This dialogue shows that balance between being direct and respectful. The doctor asks, "What seems to be the problem?"
Very straightforward.
Yeah, but not rude.
Right.
And Kathy lists her symptoms.
Clearly and concisely.
Yeah, and I noticed she uses "a" before each one.
Good catch.
I remember from our last deep dive, that's grammatically correct.
You got it.
But what's really important is how the conversation is structured.
Right. It's like a back and forth.
Yeah, Kathy describes her symptoms.
And the doctor asks questions to get more details.
And then we get the classic doctor's orders.
Like, take aspirin every 4 hours and get plenty of rest.
Exactly.
Those instructions are given in a very specific way,
Yeah, like with authority.
but also with concern for the patient.
Now imagine we're lost in a new city.
Okay.
In the asking directions dialogue, Mark asks, "Could you tell me where the library is?"
Very polite.
Yeah, he's deferring to the locals' knowledge.
Right.
And Nancy's directions are super clear.
She uses landmarks and street names.
Yeah, no overly complicated language.
Simplicity is key when you're giving directions.
This reminds me of another interesting aspect of American communication:
What's that?
handling emergency situations.
Oh, yeah.
The calling for help dialogue is intense.
Definitely raises the stakes.
Peter's voice is full of urgency when he reports the accident.
Like, hey, that car just ran a red light and hit that truck.
But then he's totally calm when he calls 911.
Right. He gives the location and describes what happened.
Clearly and concisely.
Even though it's a stressful situation.
It shows how important clear communication is in emergencies.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go to the supermarket.
All right.
This dialogue is full of spontaneous decisions.
And casual language.
Louise just throws out the idea of baking cookies.
How about baking some cookies today?
It's not a demand, it's just a suggestion.
Right. And Julia considers it for a second.
Yeah, and then she's like, yeah, that's a great idea.
And then they just go through the ingredients.
Like they're making a mental checklist.
It's all very practical.
Okay, let's run some errands.
Sounds good.
Claire needs to get things done.
What does she say?
She says, "I need to get my hair cut,
Uh-huh.
and I need to have my new pants hemmed."
So she uses both get and have.
Yeah, is there a difference?
Well, that is more active.
Okay.
Like you're doing it yourself.
And have means someone else is doing it for you? Interesting.
Both are totally normal in American English.
And the receptionist gives clear instructions.
About where to find the salon and the tailor.
Yeah, super helpful.
Okay, what's next?
Let's go to the post office.
Oh, fun.
Carol is super polite.
How does she phrase it?
"I need to mail this package to New York, please."
Even at the post office.
Yeah, politeness is key.
And the clerk explains the different mailing options.
And gives the price in a couple ways.
Using both numbers and words.
That flexibility is interesting.
Americans are good at adapting to the situation.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
I know, right?
From dining and doctor's appointments.
To errands and emergencies.
But what about those casual conversations between friends?
Oh, those are great.
The catching up after class dialogue is a good example.
Okay, what happens there?
Linda asks Frank how his physics exam went.
It's a simple question, but it shows she cares.
And Frank is honest about his feelings.
Yeah, he's relieved it's over.
And he uses contractions like how'd, and
That's typical of informal speech.
it makes the conversation sound more natural.
And then they both talk about their experiences.
Using casual language.
And showing interest in each other's lives.
It's a good reminder that these small conversations are important for relationships.
Absolutely.
This is so fascinating.
I know, it's amazing how much we can learn from these everyday dialogues.
We've seen how American English changes depending on the situation,
From formal to informal.
and how those choices reflect deeper cultural values.
But we're not done yet.
There's still more to explore,
So many interesting snippets.
each one giving us a different perspective on how Americans communicate.
Stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive.
We'll be talking about everything from expressing excitement and discussing talents.
To navigating tricky situations and even talking about pets.
It's going to be a whirlwind tour of American English at its best.
You won't want to miss it.
We've seen how Americans handle greetings and navigate those tricky situations and even order food.
Right.
But there's even more to uncover.
So definitely.
These little snippets of conversation can tell us so much about American culture.
Yeah, how they express themselves, build rapport, all those things.
Exactly. Like in the dialogue, I'm really excited.
Okay, what's going on there?
Well, Patty's talking about her aunt's birthday party,
Uh-huh.
and she says, I'm really excited. I feel like that really adds a lot of emphasis.
Oh, it totally does. Americans love using really to amp up their emotions,
Interesting.
especially positive ones.
And she also uses a tag question. Aren't you?
Oh, right.
Like she's inviting agreement.
Tag questions are super common in American English. They're a way of softening a statement and encouraging the other person to respond.
It's amazing how much impact those little things can have.
It really is.
Okay, let's talk about something that can be a little sensitive.
What's that?
Age.
Okay.
In the talking about age dialogue, Patty mentions her aunt's birthday,
Right.
and she uses the future tense. She'll be 55 on May 14th.
Interesting.
It's like she's avoiding directly stating her aunt's current age,
Yeah, that can be a bit sensitive in American culture.
especially for women.
Right. It's more polite to focus on the upcoming celebration.
So it's about being mindful of social conventions.
Definitely.
And then when Susan mentions her own mother's age, she gives the full date.
My mother was born on August 12th, 1970.
Right, it adds a level of formality.
It shows that the date is important.
Speaking of special occasions, let's go back to the movies.
Okay.
But this time it's about a seating problem.
Uh-oh.
Bob needs to ask someone to move so he can sit with his friend.
That could be awkward.
Yeah. But he does it so politely.
What does he say?
Would you mind moving over one?
Oh, very indirect.
Yeah, it avoids any confrontation.
And the woman is totally accommodating.
No, not at all.
It seems like even in those potentially awkward moments, Americans try to be polite.
Absolutely.
It's about keeping things harmonious.
Okay, let's move on to something more fun.
All right, what's that?
Talents?
Okay.
Sandra and Julie are talking about what they're good at. Julie says, I'm really good at drawing.
And what does Sandra say?
She suggests they draw pictures for each other.
How about we draw pictures for each other?
It's a great way to encourage Julie.
Yeah, and show interest in her talent.
It's like they're building each other up.
I love that.
Okay, now let's talk about sports.
A classic American topic.
Jack says he much prefers basketball to soccer.
So he's stating a strong preference.
And Phil keeps the conversation going.
What's your favorite basketball team?
Americans love connecting over shared interests.
Especially sports.
Now let's imagine we're at a theater performance.
Okay, I'm there.
Shannon is blown away.
What does she say?
She uses words like incredible and superb.
Wow, she was really impressed.
Yeah, and Elena responds by talking about the costumes.
The costumes were stunning too, weren't they?
She uses a tag question again.
To invite Shannon's agreement.
It's like they're sharing the experience together.
Okay, where are we going next?
Let's talk about vacations.
Everyone loves a good vacation.
Sophie wants to relax.
How does she say that?
I'm just going to relax on the beach and read.
Ah, that sounds nice.
And Julie agrees.
That sounds lovely.
It's like she's validating Sophie's need for a break.
Okay, one last stop.
Let's go to the pet store.
All right.
Gary wants a low-maintenance pet.
What does he say exactly?
I'd like to get a pet that doesn't require a lot of attention.
Makes sense. People are busy these days.
And Connie suggests a fish.
They're pretty to look at, and they don't need to be walked or trained.
The perfect low-maintenance pet.
Definitely.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into American English conversation.
Wow. What a journey.
We've learned so much.
It's about hidden meanings and politeness.
And how language reflects culture.
It's amazing how much we can learn from these everyday interactions.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
Likewise.
We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive.
And remember, language is always changing.
So keep listening, keep learning.
And keep those conversations going.
Until next time, happy